All right. Thanks again, everybody. So I want to start with one of my favorite lines from the Genjo Koan. The Buddha way is basically leaping clear of the many and the one. Thus, there are birth and death, delusion and realization, sentient beings and Buddhas. Yet, in attachment, blossoms fall, and in aversion, weeds spread. A little louder. In attachment, blossoms fall, and in aversion, weeds spread. Dogen is underscoring here the importance of no preference. Can you guys hear me in the back? If not, come forward. Come. Norman talked quite a bit about preference in our June Samish session. How do we have no preference? As Norman pointed out, we all have preference. He said, you'd rather live than die, right? So, is it possible to leap clear? Many of our preferences are an expression of our will to survive, our survival instinct. Recently, our Kenyan adopted daughter came to visit. She stayed for 2 weeks at our house with her 4-month-old baby, who was just such an adorable little thing. And I noticed right away, it had been a while since I'd hung out with babies, infants, that he had very strong preferences. He preferred to be full and satiated rather than having hunger pangs. He preferred a clean, fresh diaper to a dirty one. He preferred being warm and cozy, right? So we all prefer pleasant versus unpleasant experiences, right? Well, I want to use this time together to tell you about how I was given the opportunity to work with my own preferences that emerged during our recent Samish session. I've noticed repeatedly in myself, and then again when I was at session, a strong preference in myself for feeling spacious over feeling limited or contracted. I often resist my own contractive reactions. These different aspects of experience are referred to in many different ways in our tradition. The ultimate or historical perspective, big mind and little mind, emptiness or separateness, original self or conditioned self, enlightenment and delusion. I ask myself, who wouldn't prefer boundlessness over separateness? Yet, in attachments, blossoms fall, and in aversion, weeds spread. I realized during session that Dogen was pointing me toward an important lesson. As many of you know, I was co-ino at the session, and in that role, I felt some responsibility for helping to create the container that holds session, supporting the forms, the rituals, the schedule, and the silence. But in the first couple days of session, I found myself engaged pretty continuously in conversation. People were getting sick at session, and the medical committee had an impromptu meeting to come up with a current COVID policy, and somehow I found myself entwined in that process, which of course required a lot of speech. Session participants were still adjusting in the first days of silence to notes, so they would come up to me and ask, should I tell you or should I give you this note now? It's an adjustment. And for my first time, I had a wonderful co-ino, Desiree, so helpful. But anytime you put two people together to share one job, then it requires the need to converse in order to coordinate efforts. If I had been smart, I would have had a meeting before and maybe in the very first day of sesshin to coordinate these efforts, to avoid the need to speak. But alas, silly me, I didn't have that forethought. So I found myself talking to my work buddy, my co-ino, who like me just wanted to do a good job. And with all that happening, I found myself in the first days of sesshin feeling frustrated with the situation, tense because my wish was to support silence, and feeling critical of those talking around me, talking to me. I felt the urge to control my environment. Of course, I didn't like seeing and feeling these critical and controlling parts of myself. I sat with myself. I tried to avoid feeling critical and controlling. My father, who was loving, had a critical and controlling edge. And I tried to convince myself I was not like him. I didn't want to be like him. I was trying, making a great effort, in fact, to make those parts of myself go away. So I tried working with a gata. I breathe in, I relax, I breathe out, I let go. You can guess. Did not work so well for me. I thought at first that the gata helped me to relax, but the following day, my efforts, my tension, my contraction, my efforts to control my environment came back with a fervor. I went to Dokusan and I shared with Norman that I was trying to let go, but trapped in the snares of my own mind. First, he mirrored that back to me, trapped in the snares of my own mind. And I shared that my efforts to let go were actually counterproductive because efforting, you can't actually effort to let go, right? That's like counterproductive. So Norman's first reply was, have patience with yourself. He's a kind man. Have patience with yourself. But then he said something that was quite pivotal for me in my process. He pointed toward the bodhisattva heart that lives under the critic and the controller. He helped me to see that love, a good-hearted intention, a bodhisattva spirit underlied the parts of myself that I was resisting. What I most wanted, what was alive in my heart, was to support the depth of practice that can only be felt in the silence of sesshin. Over the days of sesshin, I continued to think about this conversation with Norman. And this verse from Dogen's Fukan Zazengi kept coming up, echoing in my mind. The way is basically perfect and all-pervading. How could it be contingent upon practice and realization? The Dharma vehicle is free and untrammeled. What need is there for concentrated effort? I was caught in the snares of my own mind, in my own efforts, my effort, ironically, to let go. I was trying too hard. Dogen goes on, indeed, the whole body is far beyond the world's dust. Who could believe in a means to brush it clean? It is never apart from one, right where one is. It is never apart from one, right where one is. From my conversation with Norman, I saw that even in the center of my bounded, constricted, limited self, it's a bodhisattva trying to express her heart. And Dogen continues, if there is the slightest discrepancy, the way is as distant as heaven from earth. Well, a bodhisattva's heart expressed through the conditioned self is as distant as heaven from earth. Yet it is never apart from one, right where one is. What we need is to look deeper. Norman helped me to look deeper. When I saw the vow of love under my efforts to control my environment, letting go naturally happened. I relaxed, and I was able to accept the parts of myself that I was trying to push away, the critical and controlling parts. I was able to accept those parts of my personality. And when I did so, they softened, allowing me to connect with a more unbound experience. Limitation is a doorway to the unbound self. That's the name of this talk. Limitation is a doorway to the unbound self. In Suzuki Roshi's book, Not Always So, there's a chapter called Wherever You Are, Enlightenment is There. Here are a couple things he writes in this chapter. He says, nothing we see or hear is perfect, but right there in the imperfection is perfect reality. It sounds a lot like Dogen and Fukan Zazengi, who wrote, the way is basically perfect and all-pervading. It is never apart from one, right where one is. Suzuki also writes, you may think that you can only establish practice after you attain enlightenment, but it is not so. True practice is established in delusion, in frustration. If you make a mistake, that is where you establish practice. There is no other place for you to establish your practice. Go deeper, right here. Stand in the muddy water, right in the middle of your constricted self. As Ukumara says, your limited individual self. We all have one. Yesterday, I went for a Dharma talk walk with my teacher, Chris. And then I had Doug-san with her on Zoom today. I told her I went for a walk with her yesterday, and I asked her if she knew. Maybe not all of you know her. She lives in California. I was listening to a recording of a Dharma talk on my walk. Anyway, in her Dharma talk, she was talking about Joan Sutherland's commentary on the Vimalakirti. Did I say it right? Vimalakirti. Vimalakirti. Big word. Joan brought up something I hadn't heard referred to before. She spoke of endarkenment. Endarkenment. That word really perked my interest. We often hear about enlightenment, but what about this endarkenment? Enlightenment, she said, is the brilliant illumination that lifts us up out of the suffering world. It's about transcending. the world. Endarkenment, on the other hand, is the radiance of the deep that lets us find home in the world. Endarkenment is the heart that breaks open to life, the birthplace of compassion.
Yeah, it's very quiet.
Yeah. Where should I start?
Endarkenment.
Endarkenment, on the other hand, is the radiance of the deep that lets us find home in the world. Endarkenment is the heart that breaks open to life. It is the birthplace of compassion. Ultimately, this dualistic understanding that enlightenment is here while endarkenment is there isn't really dual, she says. In Taoist language, endarkenment is the yin that complements the yang's enlightenment. I brought a yin-yang symbol. So if you look at this symbol, many of you know I teach Chinese medicine, and this is really at its core. So I was pretty happy to stumble upon this. This symbol represents a very cyclic dynamic relationship in which the yang becomes yin, becomes yang, becomes yin. And right at the center of the biggest yang, you find yin, right in its heart. And in the heart of the biggest yin, you find yang. In the center of what Okumura calls the limited individual self is Buddha's heart. In the center of my critical and controlling self, I found my bodhisattva heart, my wish to help and support the Sangha. Right? Chris, in my Dokusan with Chris today, she used the metaphor of a swinging gate, right? On both sides of the gate, we have endarkenment, enlightenment, absolute, relative, limited self, boundless self. A swinging gate. I hope it's okay for me to quote you, Talis. I just remember at the end of the Genjo Koan class when we were writing our poetry, and you, I hope I'm quoting you correctly, referred to the relative and the absolute as lovers. And I thought that was so sweet. Another metaphor that really, I think, works in talking about this. So, yeah, we have some time. I'm gonna guide you through a little inner reflection before we break into triads. So I just want to invite you to just either close your eyes or just a soft gaze, whatever feels good to you. And I'm going to invite you to reflect and feel into an area of your life where you feel contracted. Maybe that's in a relationship, at work. Maybe it's your relationship to work. Maybe in a relationship with a family member, a friend, or maybe someone here in our Sangha. Some area of your life where you feel constricted, reactive, and you see parts of yourself come up that make you feel tense or uncomfortable. What is the quality of the contraction that you feel? In what ways do you feel small or limited here? Do you experience yourself as separate or bounded? How does the contraction or constriction feel in your body? How is it expressed in this relationship or situation? And then I'm going to invite us into triads. And in your triad, you'll each get a chance to speak. You could briefly describe the way or the feeling of contraction, the way you feel or the feeling of contraction in that relationship. But it's fine to keep it brief. You don't have to tell a long story about it, because what I think is more important is for you to share with the group what might be the deeper desire underneath it. What might be living in your bodhisattva heart? What good intention might be underlying that contracted place? Just see what comes up. There's no right or wrong answer, and you may or may not find a contracted place. You may or may not find what's your intention under it. But it's just an opportunity to explore and see what comes up. So there are a couple people here I don't recognize, so maybe you haven't done triads before. So I'll explain. We'll get into groups of 3, and each person will have 5 minutes to talk.
5 minutes.
Okay, 4. I was deliberating between 4 and 5. 4 minutes to talk. And just explore and see what comes up. And you can allow it to be just a stream of consciousness sharing. And what comes up for you may not have anything to do with what I ask. But again, I'll just reiterate. Describe the feeling or the contraction that might be alive in this relationship. You can keep it brief. Your listeners don't need to understand the details. It's more important to share with the group what's your deeper desire, what's in your bodhisattva heart, what good intentions might be underlying this in you. So you'll have 4 minutes to talk. If you run out of things to say, it's fine to sit quietly. Sometimes in the silence, something unexpected or unknown emerges. emerges. So it's actually great to sit together in the silence. I know sometimes people are like, I'm done, go on to the next person, but I'll ring a bell and then you can go on to the next person, and then we'll have a little time when we come back together. Does that sound good? Okay. You're pausing the recording.